I need to answer nature. It's antagonizing me.
Everything is an antagonist. I'm thinking that way too now.
Damn. Beset with antagonists.
Very much. Like my coffee's cold.
It's too hot. Damn you, coffee! Why must you always blunt me at every time? You. Hello and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST number 494. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Tance and Baines.
Hello.
My fellow antagonists.
I always try to get my hello in the right order, depending on what order you say our names in.
Oh, really? I never noticed.
I've gone against his ordering and just said hello first. Waiting for
this antagonistic behavior. So, in this QUACKCAST, we're going to be talking about not having an antagonist, or not having a human embodied antagonist, which is quite an interesting notion that Baines brought up in his Thursday's news post, because stories don't need a villain.
And I'm going to antagonize you. Because a story not having an antagonist does not mean that it does not have a villain or many.
And vice versa.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, antagonists and villains can be different things, sure.
They're different, yeah. That's fascinating. We can talk about that too.
Okay. All right. Before we get into that, I've got to bring up the featured comic. QUACKCAST gave us The History of One Humankind. So, go for it, Kwai.
Hello, this is QUACKCAST, and the feature I've selected for this week is The History of One Humankind by Conan Bolt, and it is rated E for everyone. This is a thinking person's comic with the history of different world civilizations told in mini vignettes that space 3 to 4 comic pages. The History of One Humankind displays costumes and fashion worn during the era of historical times while using an art style that is similar to Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. A recommended read for historians, anthropologists, students of history, and professors alike. If the Tower of Babel or stories of the Mayan civilization and the Persians have ever piqued your interest, then read this comic. The art is drawn with a digital drawing pencil on a tan-colored comic strip. It is really interesting to see so many different characters drawn in very unique styles. Take a trip into ancient history and read The History of One Humankind by Conan Bolt, rated E.
And that was Kwai talking about the history of one humankind. Okay, so after that we have the featured music. This week Gun Wallace has given us a theme to the Second Crimean War, which is a good comic. Heavy grey winter skies, pregnant with snow and sadness. Cold snaps the brittle air, crystal daggers hang in the forest, a whistling breeze sings of desolation and loneliness. A thaw will be long in coming to this blighted world of war and suffering. Synth violins and cellos set the scene beautifully. Touches of quiet bass and piano round out the landscape of the Second Crimean War. So, take it away, Gun Wallace, with the Second Crimean War. And that was the theme to the Second Crimean War, a comic by The Doodler, rated T. Okay, so we're talking about antagonists in stories, or not really having them, not having a human embodied antagonist, or not having a human embodied antagonist being the main source of conflict that drives the story. Is that fair to say, Baines?
Yeah, because I guess there could be an antagonist, quote unquote, who doesn't really play a large role in the main conflict of the story.
Yeah, like for example, Wall-E.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. You mentioned that on Patreon or in the talk before we came on the air. Like, I don't remember if there was an antagonist in that movie, really.
Yeah, well, there sort of is. Like, there's a mad navigation program in the ship. So it's not the captain of the ship, because he's an inept, fat, blob marshmallow man. He doesn't know what's going on.
Lovable cat. Yeah, but is he still an antagonist?
No, the antagonist is, such as it is a computer program in the ship that wants people to stay on the ship because that's what its programming said, and it still wants to do it. So, and it doesn't want to go back to Earth, even though the Earth has been found to be producing, flowering plants again. So it's not just a rubbish heap. So, such as the antagonist is, it's this thing. Whereas in reality, the real story is Wall-E and the growing love with him and Eve, the other robot, and Wall-E trying to, convince the humans they should come back to Earth. So it's incidental that this computer wants to do this thing. It wants to keep on, piloting this ship and all around the galaxy and not coming home. That's not really a big thing until the end of the story, when it's preventing Wall-E from, convincing the humans. The real thing is getting humans back to Earth and his love with Eve. So, yeah. In that form, yeah, it's, I don't know what the real source of conflict there is. It's trying to convince people, trying to move people away from their apathy. I think that's the real source.
Right.
Because the whole antagonistic thing with the computer program, this is like, I watched it ages ago, so I can't remember that clearly, only comes in as a way of preventing him from completing that project. Like, putting barriers in his way. It's not really, the initiation of the conflict in the story. The initiation of the conflict in the story is...
I guess it can be a little bit murky sometimes, but that, like, a lot of stories will have that kind of structure, right? Like, you have, oh boy, say, like, The Little Mermaid. Her dealing with, it's a love story, but it's her dealing with whatever, being in the new world kind of thing, keeping that secret. And then there's a villain that doesn't, and this has been too long, I'm just going by my memory, my terrible memory. But then the villain doesn't really become a huge threat until the end. It's like, I might be wrong about that, but...
It's the villain is an antagonist because she prevents...
Ursula.
Yes, that's the one. She prevents Ariel from getting that kiss. Like, she could have gotten the kiss in the middle of the movie, more or less. So she prevents the happy ending from happening until the very end.
She's the villain. And the computer in Wall-E then is probably... We're using antagonist, or I'm using antagonist and villain, like, kind of interchangeably. They can be two different things, I know. I got lazy with that. But so the computer program is the same way, right? Even though you're not seeing it a lot throughout the movie.
That doesn't mean that it's not the force preventing the goal from, happening.
Right.
Well, it wasn't really the Force until the end, though. Because I think, because it didn't even know the Earth was alive. So it had no idea. It was just doing its job. It's only at the end when it realizes that, oh, my job is done now. I won't have a job anymore. That's when it becomes an antagonistic force. So in the beginning, it wasn't just there to keep humans away from Earth. It was just doing its job. It wasn't being bad.
Well, I wouldn't know really because I haven't actually seen Wall-E. So it's just what I have heard from everyone else that has seen it. So I wouldn't really know. But if we assume that there's this love interest between the two robots, I think the robot that researches stuff.
Yeah,
Eve is at first is hostile, I think, to Wall-E, isn't she, or something like that.
Yeah.
And and Wall-E, I don't know if he is, but perhaps his efforts to communicate with Eve and stuff is like the lack of communication or the lack of common experience with this can get to be the antagonist in the beginning, perhaps.
Yeah.
So you have an external, and maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't know. You guys have seen it.
I mean, it raises a question like, does the antagonist have to be revealed? Like, if there are antagonistic forces and you don't really see the source until the end, that's many stories work that way, right?
Well, I just think in Wall-E, it's that navigation computer wasn't even acting as an antagonist, even behind the scenes in the beginning. It was doing
though, because the apathy and the it wasn't intentional, but
the enabling. For example, it could be the enabling of destructive behavior, self-destructive behavior that is the antagonist, or the antagonistic force.
Right.
Say.
I don't think so, because it's doing its job in that it's just piloting the ship. That's all. It is working as a like an engine. This is not wanting to make people apathetic. It's just doing a job.
That's okay though. Like, it doesn't have to be like evil and deliberately evil to be an antagonist.
But I mean,
it's
not acting as an antagonist. It doesn't have a motivation, but it's also not.
That's okay though.
That's not. Yeah.
It's just it's piloting. What I'm saying is, it does become an actual antagonistic force towards the end, in that it goes, oh, Wally's gonna get this plant sort of thing. I have to stop it.
I would say that it becomes a different antagonist in the end. Like in the beginning, it is like serving all these humans and stuff. If from the montages and scenes I have seen, it's that they get progressively less and less mobile, less and less active, more and more obese, and do really nothing because the computer is doing everything for them, or the thing.
Yeah, for generations. Yeah, they've been just floating around in this giant ship.
Enabling a self-destructive behavior, whether it is being done on purpose, like, I'm going to enable their worst habits so that they will be very passive and blah, blah, blah. This would be actively being an antagonistic force, or they could just be an antagonist by existing and doing this particular function. So that would be the first. And then when it actively wants to stop the humans from going back to Earth, then it becomes an active antagonist, and instead of enabling and serving people, it tries to stop them from doing whatever they want.
From my point of view, I'd say it's only an antagonist when it stops them. I would say initially it's the human's own nature that's their antagonist, because that's what causes them to be like that. So the computer has no stake in it in any form. It's not making them be like that. It's not even enabling that. It's just doing what it's doing, it's just working as a sub-function. It's just working to provide them food and entertainment the way your TV does. But it doesn't have any role in it. Whereas it's the human's own nature that does that. So
I think it's the protagonist, and I might be on a thin branch here, but I think it's the protagonist that has to be intentional. An antagonist can be just existing as it's supposed to and just doing its thing, like you're saying.
But what I'm saying is, it can just be existing, but it's not intentional, even in the form of the story, like structurally antagonistic. Because what I'm saying is, it's the human nature that is the problem.
Absolutely, but that does not negate the other. It's that human nature created this particular thing that is the antagonist due to, or because of, if you like, human nature that wants, the quick, easy, whatever, the enabling things, because we want to be enabled.
I mean, I think that's the genesis of how it becomes antagonistic. But I just don't think that it is in the beginning. I think that...
But isn't it a problem, though?
Only at the end it becomes a problem.
The problem presented as a problem in the beginning, since they have this whole montage of people getting progressively fatter over generations and less active and less intelligent, basically.
But that's mainly because they're human. Because their needs are taken care of, I would say. I don't
know why this is so hard for you to accept, but the thing is, the reason it's not because they are human, it's because they don't need to think, they don't need to act, they don't need to do anything but just lean back in the chair and enjoy themselves. That's the only thing that they need to do. They don't actually have any conflict to resolve until the very end. But that they have. Yes, but this is the thing that is caused by the machine, because the machine is designed to do everything for them. So whether or not it intends to, it's irrelevant. It's just that the fact that it allows them not to have any problem to solve makes them basically have a smooth brain and a rotund, soft body, and that is the problem. And the problem is a direct result from this particular machine.
I know where you're coming from, but I'm just saying it's not the machine that does it. Even though you're saying like it's a direct result for the machine, it's the issue there is human nature that does it. Because the machine is irrelevant. The machine.
No, it's why isn't it irrelevant?
Because human nature is the thing that has been. What's that?
That is once removed. It is a problem, yes, and it is, but it's not the antagonist. It's the source of the antagonists.
I think it is. I think that is the main. It has been enabled by their own laziness, by their cleverness. Their cleverness has enabled it, but it is their human nature that is the real antagonist for these people. And that is the computer is incidental to it, which is shown in the end because it's only like it's only the attack against Wally is this simple stuff of preventing him putting this plant in this program thing to change the program. It's just this very like simple little conflict that's happening. We don't see this grander conflict against these.
What if the machine did not exist and they had to do everything on the ship, like Star Trek? What then? Would they be able to become soft, fat, and inert?
Well, yeah, the people would just create systems. So you don't need like this is an the whole idea behind, I think, the whole idea behind the notion of the story that these people were, came up with was the idea that humans, if we follow our nature, will turn into couch potatoes.
Look. You are going to the theme and the didactic aspect of the story. That is not the antagonist. We are talking about antagonistic forces. Now, why and how these forces were put into place and what this teaches us about ourselves is a different thing than whether they are the antagonistic forces.
Well, I'm not like mixing those things, Tans. I was just saying that.
Would the entire ship be full of these people? Because if I say it again, I'm going to be accused of fact-checking.
What I was trying to say, Tans, was because that was the theme, that was the initiation of the story, that this justifies my reasoning of saying it's human nature, because this is what they wanted to talk about.
I'm not saying it's not human nature, but it's not human nature that is making to them.
I think that it is.
This is the name of my autobiography, by the way.
I just don't think the actions of the automation are the main force that is creating the conflict in the story. It's just to me it's an incidental thing.
Yes, but let's compare how we act and what we use in order to do things compared to people that didn't have our technology. The thing is, we want to be active, we want to be creative and stuff, right? It is part of human nature. If you had, and we are getting there, if you have a machine, a smart house that would do everything for you, including earn money for you. Okay, so that you didn't have to work, you didn't have to resolve any problem for whatever reason. That would have been created by humanity's tendency and need to solve the problem before it appears and make life as easy as possible. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. However, the fact that you as a person would have grown to be unable to problem solve and unable to prepare your own food, for example, or things like this would not be because of human nature per se immediately. It would be because you have the capacity, due to this machine, this smart house that you have, to have all these things ready-made for you. Therefore, you are under-equipped, and you remain under-equipped for something else. So this is an antagonistic force. Now, whether this force is a result of human nature is a different discussion. And yes, human nature as well is antagonistic to this particular situation described in Wall-E. But we cannot say that the machine becomes an antagonist only towards the end. It just changes its quality of what kind of antagonist it is.
I will still respectfully disagree myself, because I still see it as even in your example of this house that provides everything, I still say it really is a matter of perspective in a lot of ways, whether you're looking at it from this perspective of the human who has become over-reliant on their machines and their stuff, or you're looking at perspective of this thing that they've created to enable this. So for me, I'm looking at it from a perspective of the humans alone and thinking, oh, what do I have to overcome personally to change my situation? Myself is what I have to overcome. My own apathy, my own reticence, my own inertia. And that's my problem. It's not really this stuff that's causing me to do this. It's really myself.
Yes, okay. But the reason that your inertia and these elements of your nature have become this problematic, why have they become this problematic? Why have they been overgrown as problems, whereas in previous eras, for example, other elements of human nature were the bigger issue and not the inertia? Why has this occurred? Perhaps it's a vicious cycle. But the enabling element of the machine is the reason that these people have been rendered basically neutralized. They are neutralized. They have lost their agency.
I would still, from my perspective, so I'm not trying to convert you, I would still say, from my perspective, I think that it is, from the way the story is written, that it is humans and a fault they have to overcome in themselves, rather than a problem of the machine being the antagonistic force. From my own perspective, the way I'm thinking about it, I'm not trying to...
Okay, do you see it at all from my perspective? Just wondering.
No, I respectfully disagree.
Here, we're talking about a literary tool.
Yeah. I still think that it is mainly about humanity.
Not about what it's about. It's about how this translates in a story and what creates the problem.
Yeah, I think that humanity has, like, this is all...
Humanity in the story of Wall-E is not a character.
Well, I'm thinking... Chance, could you stop? What I'm trying to say is that... Okay, so the antagonist for these people that has caused them to be like this. Now, I'm saying that's themselves, and you're saying that, that's the machine that's enabling it. Yeah, if we're talking about, like, in the structure of the story, most of the first half is him just trying to win over Eve, so there isn't any kind of thing that computer hasn't set that in motion. The computer hasn't sent Eve to do the thing, in an antagonistic way. Eve is automatically going and looking for life, and when she finds it, like, with the plants are showing that Earth has recovered, this is the sign for the ship to come back to Earth. So there's no negative kind of force in that. That's just a neutral sort of thing. So the antagonistic factor there is just their lack of communication, the way you were saying. So, I don't know. Let's move on to another story.
Look, I will say this one last thing and I will totally move on. However, absolutely, it's an analogy and simile for human nature and the fight with ourselves that we have. But in the structure of the story, this translates, it's an avatar, if you like, in a specific, it's a specific tool. It's not the fact, like the story, from what I understand, now we'll have to sit down and watch it. From what I understand, is split into big sections. The first one is Wally and Eve, their romance, and the fact that Eve finds life and then calls the ship back. Right. So, and then the second part is the machine in the ship realizing that it's out of a job, and then it wants to stop this from happening. So far, so good.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, it's been so long, but yeah.
Okay. So, and the whole thing here is that you have humans that are basically completely inert, and they don't have any agency. And this has happened not because the machine is evil or is evil until it realizes it doesn't have a job. It has happened because they have designed the particular machine to do everything for them so that they do nothing.
Yeah.
And so over the generations, you get a progressive worsening of the situation due to this particular machine that does everything for them. And if you like, because they choose to just let it do its thing forever, in all eternity. So the functionality of this particular machine causes the problem on the humans, not for Wally and Eve. Okay, we're talking about the antagonistic forces on the human, not on the robots. That's the one I was focusing on. So anyway, that's done. And that displayed the, antagonist force, when we are talking about, I guess.
Well,
so.
I think the real antagonist there was the concept that we were debating rather than you or I.
Yeah, the concept, yes, was the antagonist. It's just that it was translated in a specific tool. It manifested, if you like, in a specific way.
Oh no! What I mean is the antagonist between you and I, because we had an antagonistic discussion.
Yeah, the antagonist was the feeling that I was not getting through to you, that I was talking about something else than what you were talking about. That's never the issue. And now it's resolved, I hope.
Oh, jeez. Well, yeah, there can be different ways of handling antagonists in stories, and they don't have to be the antagonistic force of the antagonist for the entire story, do they? They can change.
Exactly.
Some of my favorite animes are stories without a strong antagonist, where say I brought up Food Wars. I think I might have brought it up in the Patreon thing, where there's the antagonist in those stories. Like, there's not a real antagonist really for a lot of those stories. Well, it's okay. So we might have a chef who's a bit mean or whatever, but I think the antagonist is usually like the challenge people have to overcome of producing a good menu. They have to produce a good dish, so it's just in terms of a menu thing, and so they create incredible drama over small things that are involved in the creation of a dish, of a food dish. So, and the challenges that arise in the story are things that are about cooking. So, having to prepare ingredients and that kind of thing, and getting the exact right ingredients, which to me, the way I like, the reason I like these stories that don't have a strong, human embodied antagonist, even though these stories, they might have, like I said, a nasty chef, the thing that I like about that is because that is a very realistic thing based, because in reality, most of the challenges we face don't involve human embodied antagonistic forces. They involve struggles against time or taste or tiredness or illness or just ourselves. And I think stories that take that kind of thing on and use that as their source of conflict can make really relatable kind of stories surprisingly interesting, because villains and evil characters being the antagonist, that's fair enough, but in reality we don't face too many instances where that kind of thing happens, so those are quite rare, but they're overrepresented in stories, I think.
It depends on the sort of villainy, I guess. But usually it's that we are presented with perhaps villainous, quote unquote, or definitely antagonistic behavior coming from people that are not necessarily evil or looking to be our antagonist. So, but they exist and they are in the way. In a way.
Oh yeah, they definitely exist. So say in your comic Without Moonlight, the Nazis are human embodied antagonists, and that makes total sense. This is a war comic. This is a real situation where that really actually happens. And in Pinky TA as well, you know, sometimes I have human antagonists, and because, you know, it's a war comic and that's the kind of thing that you have to have. So in those kind of stories that does. But have you ever noticed like in movies and TV shows you've watched and you think, oh my God, why is this character being a villain? Why are they being an antagonist? There's no reason. That doesn't make the story that actually makes the story very boring and very like rote, because you're just making the character an antagonist. But they don't actually need to face, you know, normally there would not be an antagonistic relationship between these characters. They're only doing it to create a story out of nothing. Yeah, well, typical Strange. Yes, that's true. That doesn't often have antagonistic characters, you know, in the situations. So yeah, that's a good example. But do you often find that when you're watching things, like I have found this, like in movies and TV shows, where there's a human antagonist, but it just doesn't seem to fit. It seems very like they haven't thought about it enough. They've thought, oh, you know, we have to make conflict, so we'll just embody that in this opposing character. But it comes off as lazy and like ill-fitting.
I'm sure I have. They don't come to mind right now. Patterns though do. Like you have the evil mom that forbids or limits the main characters that are usually kids from doing certain things, but unless you take it from the point of view like having an unreliable narrator that presents the mom as the villain, the things that she says are not and does are not actually all that villainous, because the kids usually do go on precarious things or situations, and she is actually being pretty reasonable in what she's saying and what she is forbidding, for example. But I cannot remember a movie where I actually sided with a mom. I remember doing it, but I don't remember the movie where I did it.
Oh, it is hard to bring up examples, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, say in like there was a great sitcom, The Drew Carey Show. It's a lot of fun. It's about a bunch of people in an office, sort of all getting on and doing their thing, and they made this woman. I can't remember what her name is. She's a big fat lady with hilarious eyeshadow. So they made her a villain, and also this evil boss played by the guy who did that talk show, Baines. You like him a lot. He had that robot sidekick with the mohawk.
Oh yeah, right. Craig Ferguson.
Craig Ferguson, yeah. So he was the evil boss in the Drew Carey show, and both these actors, portray these excellent characters. They were fantastic, but in a lot of the stories in this show, they seem superfluous in that you don't need a villain to drive the conflict and the fun and the action in a sitcom. It just isn't necessary to a lot of the stories. So I think that's a good example.
I don't remember enough of the specific stories from that, but I mean, overall, I guess they sort of were the personification of like his dreary job, or like the job that kind of breaks his spirit. Just not the character in general, not in specific stories necessarily, but
yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, in terms of the fact that often people will put a villain in a story or a negative character when just because this is a convention, even though it's not required. I think that is a thing. I mean, you guys can disagree with me, but I think that is a thing, that people will add a villain or a human antagonist to a story just because.
Well, the one that I can think of, and that might be actually a hot take, I guess, that I found not really necessary in the whole scheme of things, was in Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy, the bad guy student with his posse of evil friends. And not that the character didn't have potential to be used, that's the way that the conflict that he provides is not, there is no real conflict with this guy. The story doesn't really, he rarely ever, if at all, drives the story or helps Harry or whoever to develop into anything. Like, there's literally nothing done with him. He's there just because this is a school drama with wizards, and in every school there is this bully that we absolutely need to have. Like, there is no other way. We have to have
the
bully.
Make the hero more likable and make him an underdog.
Yeah, which is one thing. So that's the one I can think of. Definitely they exist.
Neville Longbottom.
Whereas like Biff in Back to the Future is like, he's an antagonist. He's a villain. He's like, he doesn't even know that time travel exists, but he's like at every turn stopping them from doing what they're trying to do.
Yeah, he is a genuine antagonist and works very well. And that's real.
Since we talk about time travel, anyway, what ifs? If I remember right, because I haven't seen it in a lot of years, It's a Wonderful Life doesn't actually have an antagonist per se. I mean, it has it has the evil, like, I don't remember if there is an evil banker or something. I think it's just the situation of the big depression that has just happened or something like that. And it's about this character deciding to keep on living and not commit suicide. And it's the struggle is to convince the main character, that he is important enough in other people's lives, so that he shouldn't extract himself from it. So
yeah,
he doesn't really have another antagonist. It's his own self.
Yeah, very much so. It's a Wonderful Life. It's, if anything, it's the angel trying to convince him not to kill himself. that he's
Yeah.
antagonist because he wants to do it and the angel doesn't.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's
So there's one of those inner growth conflicts that you're talking about that is a deeper type, right, Oz? That you would appreciate more.
Yeah.
Sort of like your own nature is what you're battling against, with help from the angel.
It was myself
Mhm.
all along. I was the real villain in the story. It was me.
All along.
No, sometimes the antagonist might be the environment,
Sure.
in the sense that, yeah, okay, you can have all the natural disaster movie, like the big volcano erupts or the earthquake happens or what have you. But it might also be that the antagonist is the place where the person lives, like the circumstances, the social circumstances of this person are the antagonist, and that's what they have to overcome to do what they want to do or be happy or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, say the real antagonist in Slumdog Millionaire, is it that evil game show host, or is it his slum upbringing that is his poor life in India? Is that the real?
Or like take My Fair Lady, for example. Who is the antagonist in that? There is no antagonist, except her being held back by the fact that she has a bad accent and doesn't know how to act, like she has no savoir-vivre, but that's all. These are the antagonists, and that's what they are working to overcome. Her social mannerisms, basically, and her language and the way she talks. So, no villain.
And it's quite a strong story because, well, not that strong, but it's quite a good story because of that.
Oh, I think it's a very strong story, actually. I mean, as a musical as well, I think it goes really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
But Pygmalion is a strong story because precisely it has no antagonist except social norms and social structure. And it's a commentary on that.
Yeah, in that vein, Sound of Music. So we have like the Nazi kind of thing happening in the very end, but where is the real antagonist in the story? It's a love story between
I think
Maria
that,
and the Count.
Yeah, the captain.
Captain. Yeah.
I think that would be the antagonist there would be grief more than anything else, because the guy is still mourning his dead wife, and that's why all the music has gone from the disgustingly rich house, and the kids are all kept in strict discipline, because the guy, the only way he knows how to deal with his emotions is to just compartmentalize them and not address them and keep everyone else in this particular also situation. So when he overcomes his grief with her help, music returns and love can flourish. And then there are Nazis in the end.
The Nazis, they ruin everything.
Yes, that's why we can't have nice things.
Well, we've talked for a long time. Should we wrap it up now in this contentious antagonistic cast?
I don't know, we have run out of antagonism, so maybe.
That was interesting back and forth.
Yes, we dueled.
I'd say we sparred.
Yes.
Because we didn't really have anything to divide, I guess, and compete on. So
Didn't draw blood.
no.
Okay. Well, this has been an interesting QUACKCAST number 494. We're getting close to 500, so we'll have to organize our thing that we'll do. I don't know what we'll do. Some kind of group
cool
chat.
Topic?
What's that?
Oh, a group chat. I was just going to say some special topic, but I guess we always just talk about whatever we want.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what if we did like a special show or something like remember how we did those script readings?
Oh dear. Yes. Well, I could definitely write another comedy script.
It could be like a variety show in the sense that doesn't need to be necessarily all 1 hour of comedy. Could be little skits, or
Yeah.
it could be
Musical numbers.
no.
Don't sabotage this now.
I will absolutely sabotage. I can't sing, and I can definitely not rap. That was a disaster. But we could actually, for the special Patreon thing, we could be dressed up as whoever it is we're playing.
That's genius! Okay, let's work
I
towards
hope
an
I
idea.
found that. No, yes.
Definitely, we'll work towards that idea. Okay, thank you guys for listening to QUACKCAST number 494.
Thank you.